Parliament is set to debate Eskom's proposal of yet another electricity tariff hike at the request of the DA. According to reports, Eskom is looking to increase prices by over 30% and has already approached the National Energy Regulator with this proposal. Let's bring in the DA's MP Kevin Mileham. Kevin, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. I can just imagine anyone listening to this conversation, any person struggling under the cost of living crisis in our country. Their salaries have stayed the same. Eskom's prices, as just one increasing issue in their lives, have just gone up and up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are moving to a situation where people are going to be forced to choose between putting food on the table and having electricity. So it's a huge issue. But it's not just the average South African resident that is going to be affected by it. Every business, our entire economy is affected by electricity pricing. And it's going to force goods across the entire spectrum to rise in price.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the explanation is that Eskom is trying to recover 8 billion rand, an extra 8 billion rand next year, right? I mean, are we still paying for the overcharging of Medupi and Kusile? What's the 8 billion, to your understanding, that Eskom is trying to recoup?
So let's just clarify that NERSA has already approved the 8 billion rand recovery. That's part of what is called the regulatory clearing account. And that is about 4%, a 4% tariff increase on existing tariffs. Mm-hmm. Now, in addition to that, Eskom are looking for a further 36% tariff increase. And that is to pay for the hole that they're in financially. I mean, yes, it is Medupi and Kusile. It is also the fact that municipalities are in arrears to Eskom. Mm-hmm. But Eskom basically has hundreds of billions of rand. I'm not sure of the latest figure, but the last I heard, it was somewhere in the region of 380 to 400 billion rand debt. And that's what they're trying to recover here with these tariff increases, yes. From
residents and, as you say, businesses who are buckling.
Correct. Absolutely. Now, one of the challenges that Eskom has is that they are being faced with more competition. Right. And indeed, as your previous guest or the segment that you played indicated, the signing of the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act into law does create the National Transmission Company, which does open up the market to other players. It does go some way to do that, but there's going to be other costs associated with it. One of the challenges that we have is that South Africa needs an additional 14,500 kilometers of transmission lines. That's the high voltage power lines that take power from where it's generated to where it's needed. And the estimates vary, but it's gone from 180 billion rand to do that to somewhere in the region of about 250 billion rand to do that. So there's all these costs that are going to affect the consumers down the line.
Yeah. You know, at the beginning of our interview, you talked about residents having to make a choice between putting food on the table and making electricity payments. Just some context for our viewers. Consumers who currently spend, this is according to the DA's own numbers, consumers who currently spend 900 rand a month on electricity will pay 1,260 rand. It's almost 400 rand increase, Kevin, which might seem like a pittance to some, but for many, many people, for most of the people in our country, that's a lot of money.
Indeed. And we need to face facts that the cost of living crisis in South Africa is a major, major concern. You know, wages and salaries are not keeping pace with the inflationary costs of everything in our economy, whether it's transport or foodstuffs or whatever. But electricity is a major, major driver. And when you say that you're going to, or when Eskom says that they're going to ask for 36% in the next financial year, plus 4 that has already been approved, and then in the year after that, they're going to ask for a further 11%, and the year after that, a further 9%. Then we really start saying, well, how is it possible for anyone to afford electricity? And it just becomes completely unaffordable.
It's ironic, right? Because, and you'll give me some clarity on this, Kevin, the load shedding crisis ultimately led to people who could afford it to try to get off the grid, right? So a lot of people invested in solar infrastructure in their households, prepaid electricity and so on. And it's part of the reason why Eskom is struggling with the levels of debt, because they've now effectively lost a whole host of customers, not only consumers, but businesses as well.
Well, I think that there is an element of truth to that. I don't think Eskom lost revenue because Eskom was unable to provide their electricity. So they weren't generating electricity that they could then charge people for. But in the long term, yes, they have lost customers, and that has had an impact on their long-term revenue forecasts. But yes, we have seen how people taking up solar on rooftops, for example, at a business level or at a household level, has massively impacted on the load shedding crisis. Apparently, South Africa has adopted about 6.5 gigawatts of solar power over the last 2 years. That's an enormous amount, and it almost fills the hole completely that was left by Eskom in the load shedding crisis.
So what power do we have now in Parliament, this debate in Parliament? So the debate is specifically looking at what you mentioned earlier, what has already been approved by NERSA, this 8 billion rands worth of a make-up tariff. That's already been approved by NERSA. You want to interrogate the approval, and what power then does Parliament have in terms of the decisions made by NERSA, not only for this thing that's already been approved, but for the 36% that's looming?
Yeah, NERSA is an independent agency, and Parliament cannot instruct it to do one thing or another. We can't say to them, you will make a price of X. That's not in Parliament's power. What we want to achieve with this debate is we want to force the minister, we want to highlight the matter for the minister. He made a promise, Minister Ramakgopa made a promise a couple of weeks ago saying that the electricity pricing model in South Africa would be reviewed. And we want to force him to act with speed on this matter. We want the electricity pricing reviewed. We want the structure of the market reviewed. We certainly want the regulatory clearing account addressed, but equally we want to see how can government assist Eskom so that the burden is not carried by the consumers and businesses in South Africa, that electricity becomes affordable again. So that's really what we want to accomplish with this. And part of that is that we have a petition out at the moment that is asking Parliament exactly the same thing, and that has achieved great traction. I mean, we've got somewhere in the region of 13,000 signatures in just a couple of days. So it's really, really gaining traction.
Incredibly important story. DA MP Kevin Mileham, let me thank you for your time this afternoon.